In this tutorial, I will show you how to complete the questions that are similar to homework number 8. So the directions say to solve each equation, which means to isolate the variable or get it by itself. In question number 1, I have a variable on both sides, so I need to use an inverse operation to combine them. So I'm going to subtract 7x from the left and 7x from the right. This is one of those special equations where the variable disappears or cancels out on both sides. These are both additive inverses, or they sum to 0. So that leaves us with 9 on the left side and 5 on the right side. And when the variable goes missing, you either have infinite solutions or no solutions. If the statement is false, like this, 9 is not equal to 5, then there is no possible solution. Question number 2. This one has parentheses on the left side, so we need to distribute to clear those parentheses. We multiply this coefficient by every term inside. 4 times 5m is 20m. 4 times a positive 3 is positive 12. Bring down the equal sign, bring down the right side of the equation. Again, I have variables on both sides, and it doesn't matter which one I choose the inverse of, but it would be different this time. The inverse of this is minus 20m. The inverse of that is plus 20m. So you can pick either one. I'm going to choose to do the inverse of the right side so that my variable remains positive. These are opposites or inverses, so they become 0. But these are not inverses. 20m's plus 20m's make 40m's. Bring down the rest of your sentence. So now I have a variable on the left and a constant. And on the right side I only have a constant. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides to combine my constants on the right. These are inverses. And 8 minus 12 is negative 4. Clear my coefficient by using the multiplicative inverse, which is dividing by 40. These multiplicative inverses don't become 0, they actually become 1, but when your coefficient is 1, you can leave it invisible. So I'm going to write just m down here instead of 1m. You can use your calculator to divide if you're not sure what 4 divided by 40 is. Negative 4 divided by 40 is negative 1/10, or negative 0.1. For our last question, number 3, my left side of the equation has 3 terms. 1, 2, 3 terms. You can never have more than 2. If you have more than 2, it's because some of them can be combined. So these two both have x's. I am not going to do an inverse operation here. I'm not going to do minus 3x because that would be unfair. They're both on the same side. You can't do two things to the same side. So what I'm going to do here is simply do the math that it says between these two terms. 3x's plus 5x's make 8x's. Rewrite the rest of my problem. Now I can use inverse operations. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides to keep my variable positive. And now I'm going to add 1 to both sides to combine my constants. The final step is to divide by the coefficient here, and my answer will be 3. Let's take a look at the next section. The next section asks you to describe the type of slope shown in the graph. When you're describing the slope, you're not actually finding the rise over the run. You're simply indicating whether it is positive, negative, 0, or undefined. That's what type of slope means, not find the slope. So for these questions here, positive would mean an uphill line, negative would mean a downhill line, 0 would mean horizontal, and vertical would mean undefined. So it looks like over here on number 4, I have a vertical line, right? Or undefined. So you write undefined. When I read from right to left, I would be moving downhill along this line. So this line has a negative slope. And the last line is vertical, which makes that z. So this has a 0 slope. Let's take a look at the next section. This section asks you to identify the slope and y-intercept from the equation. Remember, when the equation is in y equals mx plus b form, the slope is the coefficient of x, but only if it is in this form. And it looks like all of them are, because all of them have a y all by itself. So we're looking for the coefficient of x. So in this problem, the coefficient of x is -3, and that is our slope. The y-intercept is the number in the b position, or the constant. So for number 7, the number in the b position is +8. For number 8, you can't see the coefficient of x, but it's there. It's an invisible 1. And the constant is 2. Now you notice in this problem that the mx and the b are in reverse positions. This says b plus mx. So wherever x goes, that's where the coefficient, that's where the slope will be. In this one, the coefficient is +4, and the constant is minus or -6. Now don't get tricked on this last one. I know the slope is usually a fraction, but remember, the slope is the coefficient of x, so the slope is -7. The y-intercept is 1/5. Let's take a look at a few more here. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. So if you want to get y by itself, you have to use some inverse operations. So for question 11, if I want to keep this y here, I need this -3x to go to the other side. So you can use the circle and switch work step like this, where if you switch sides, you switch signs. +3x. And this one stays where it is. It's on the right-hand side, so it remains a +4. Or you can always show the actual mathematical property, which is that you can equally add 3x's to both sides, and you would get the same answer. So you can use the shortcut of circle and switch, where if you switch sides, you switch signs, or you can show the actual property of equality. For question number 12, this is the term that's on the wrong side, so I'm going to circle and switch on the shortcut here, which means y will remain, the equal sign will remain, but the 5x is going to jump over the equal sign and switch to the other side. If you switch sides, you switch signs. The 2 did not switch sides, he simply got bumped over, so he keeps his original sign, which was an invisible positive. For question 13, the y doesn't have anything being added to it. It has a coefficient that's being multiplied to it. So we're going to use division to separate these terms. So dividing by 3 leaves us an invisible 1, and dividing the rest of the terms by 3 gives us a 5x and a -6. For the last one, you'll notice the y is on the right-hand side, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if y is by itself on the left or if y is by itself on the right, as long as y is by itself. So in this problem, y has a coefficient, not something being added to it. So I'm going to divide every term by that coefficient, which is actually -3. So this one here does not come out to an integer. It would be a decimal, so I'm going to leave it in fraction form. 6 divided by -3 is -2, so I put 1 sign here. And -3 divided by -3 is 1, so I'm going to leave that invisible. Next up, we have some graphing questions. Now, when we graphed, we used a shortcut instead of making a table of points. And the shortcut was you could graph the y-intercept point, you could graph that point, and then you could follow the directions of the slope. So let me make this graph a little bit larger so you can see better. So the y-intercept here is the number in the b position, which is positive 5. And the slope is the coefficient of x, which here is negative 3. But remember, slope indicates the ratio of the rise over the run. So if you're missing the run, you fill in an invisible 1. So the y-intercept means that you go to the y-axis. So the y-axis is the horizontal axis. So I'm going to go to positive 5 and make my first point. The slope are the directions to the next point. So the rise would be up or down, and the run would be left or right. Up is if your number's positive, down is if your number's negative. Left if your number's negative, right if your number's positive. So my numerator is negative. So I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3. And then from here, I'm going to run positive 1. Again, down 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 to the right, positive 1. Down 3, positive 1. Negative 3, positive 1. Negative 3, positive 1. When you're done, you connect your points, you draw arrows on both ends, and if you're using a ruler, you can extend that line longer than your points. And then you label the equation with its title, which is y equals negative 3x plus 5. That's the name of the equation, so you need to label it. Number 16. The y-intercept here is 6. That's my starting point. And my slope, or my directions, are 2 over 3, or a rise of 2 and a run of 3. So I'm going to start at positive 6, and I'm going to rise 2, 1, 2, and run 3, 1, 2, 3. Rise 2, run 3. I don't have very many points here. If I'd like to make the line longer and I don't have a ruler for accuracy, I could take this number and reverse both of the signs. These two numbers are still the same. Positive 2/3 and two negatives make positive. So negative 2 over negative 3 would be on the same line. So instead of going up and right, I can go down and left. Negative 2, negative 3. Negative 2, negative 3. I connect my points with a ruler, I draw arrows on both ends, and I label my line. Let's try one more. In this question, I'm missing my b term. I have a slope, but I don't have a y-intercept. The only number that can be left invisible when you're adding is 0. So the y-intercept is the origin. So the y-intercept is 0, and the slope is 4. But remember, slope is a ratio, so if you don't have the denominator, you fill in an invisible 1. So this time we're going to start at 0, and we're going to rise 4, and we're going to run positive 1. Rise 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, run 1. Rise 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, run 1. If you'd like to make more points, you just reverse both of the signs. So I can have a negative 4 and a negative 1. Down 4, left 1. Down 4, left 1. Connect your points with a straight line and label it. If I had a ruler, my line would be better than that. Don't do this. This down here, that's pretty bad. Okay, let's take a look at this last section here. Identify the slope and y-intercept of the following equations, but write it in y equals mx plus b form first. So number 18 is in y equals mx plus b form. So the slope is the coefficient, and the y-intercept is the constant at the end. Number 19 needs some manipulation here, right? We need to clear this coefficient, and it looks like we get 4 minus 9x. But remember, the slope is the coefficient, not the first number. So the slope is negative 9, the y-intercept is 4. Number 20 needs a little work as well. I'm dividing here because y has a coefficient. So my new sentence would be y equals 2x minus 6, where the slope is 2 and the y-intercept is negative 6. Number 21 is a circle and switch. Right? We have an x and a y on the same side, and you can't have that. So y would be equal to a negative 4x, and the minus 7 stays the same. So the slope is negative 4, the y-intercept is negative 7. For number 22, I also have a y and the x on the same side, so that's going to be a circle and switch as well. Switch sides, switch signs. The 8 did not switch sides, it simply moved over, so it keeps its sign. And now this last one, I have a y and an x on the same side, and y has a coefficient. So I circle in the switch, and then I divide. So I'm actually going to divide by a negative 3 here, so be careful with your signs. So I'm going to get y equals negative 2x and minus 7. So negative 2 is the slope, and negative 7 is the y-intercept. And that's how you complete the questions on homework number 8.